All right, hello and welcome back to Unqualified Analysis. I'm your host, Caleb Verzak. You can follow me on all my socials at, you guessed it, Caleb Verzak. Shoot me a DM if you want to add somebody to the show, or shoot me an email at unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. Subscribe wherever you're listening, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, any of those shits. Just go ahead and subscribe. And wow, I cursed. That's got to be a record in the last several months. I've been so good about holding back the S words and the F words, and hey, even the D words from time to time. But I'll tell you what, that was less than 20 seconds into the podcast and I cursed. We were on one today, folks. That just tells you how tired I am. I mean, I'm wearing my undershirt from work. Got so many random people trying to add me on Snapchat. I don't know what's going on there, but I digress on that front. Bots will be bots at the end of the day, right? But, I got my white shirt on, channeling my inner Josh Pate. So, instead of railing against the expansion of the playoffs, conference realignment is going to be a big two, spoiler alert. Yes, instead of all that stuff, which I, by and large, do agree with. Love Josh Pate. Go subscribe to Late Kick if you haven't already. I mean, by God, it's the number one college football show in podcast world anyways, but enough plugging anyone else's shit right now. Again, that's twice within a minute and a half now at this point. But hey, got my white t-shirt on. I mean business. Mostly just means that I got back from work roughly half an hour ago. And I'll tell you what, you wouldn't think that dozens of online training modules that bore you to tears would be hard work. But I'll tell you what, I'm probably more tired after doing a couple days of this job than I usually am coming home from driving around town delivering people food. I'll be honest, kind of miss delivering the food. Not going to miss all the miles that I'm saving on my car right now, but kind of miss the open road, man. Gotta say. But you know what? Distance makes the heart grow fonder, I suppose. What am I even talking about? Anyways, we have got probably the most unstructured show I have done to date at this point. Pretty much just shooting from the hip. Hell, I just read the intro off from last week's podcast outline. I've been in quite a transition phase. I was, at the end of last week, I was still doing delivery driving. Then I really hopped on board starting on Saturday, worked Sunday, worked Monday. I'm a hard-working man, but that was working at the new job, so we're still kind of acclimating. This is the first Monday I've actually worked on in quite some time, so a bit of an adjustment period, and as such, we are recording in the evening, folks. So I made the executive decision to, since obviously tonight, Game 7 of Celtics versus Heat, who would have thought that was going to happen when just last week both the conference finals series were at 3-0, but the Heat, by God, they're on the verge of blowing this thing, and there's a very good chance they do because Game 7 is at home for the Boston Celtics. But with that in mind, that's just about an hour and a half or so from tipping off as I record this. I'm going to put a pin in that, get back to it later, and preview the finals later as well. It's going to be a little bit of a late night addition to this episode in the editing process here. But with that in mind, can talk about the Nuggets real quick. I mean, not really a whole lot to talk about. They're the best team in the playoffs. We've already said it. Already said as much last time. They swept the Lakers. Didn't look easy at times, but really, if you watch the games and watch what they did, I mean, the Lakers threw everything they had at them in most of those games. I mean, especially in my God, in Game 4, LeBron came out looking like old LeBron, scored 30 in the first half, ran out of gas late, but it was just too much of an onslaught from Jamal Murray, from Nikola Jokic, from Michael Porter Jr., just from everyone on that team. KCP, for instance, having himself a hell of a playoffs. Like I've said probably the last 3 weeks now, maybe some of the best basketball of his entire career at this point. He's playing. If they don't win a title at this point, it's not going to be a failure because they've already made it to the finals, but it's going to be a disappointment if they lose to either of these complete and utter, I mean, almost cursed again, but let's just say haphazard teams in the East side of the bracket. We'll talk about that series a bit later, but Nuggets definitely looking like they're going to be the favorite no matter what. They've just been chilling for the past week at this point since last time we talked. Just waiting for whoever's going to come out of this series in the Eastern Conference. But, I mean, is LeBron going to retire? Well, short answer, no. Brian Windhorst, though, I mean, I'm really jumping around here thinking about all the stuff that I guess not came out, but was, trickling out in the wake of the Lakers getting swept there. Brian Windhorst did an all-time, like, Brian Windhorst move, trying to stay in the good graces of LeBron James. He said, I don't know if it's an exact quote, but the gist of the quote was, the Lakers, probably the most impressive sweep loss of all time, pretty much. There's never been a more impressive team being swept than the Los Angeles Lakers, and that was just all-time spin zone from Windy. I mean, he just keeps getting larger, and his mind keeps expanding with the rest of his body. Get some health in you, buddy. It's going to catch up to you eventually. Not trying to body shame here, but at the same time, looking a little bit like a blueberry. You got to slim down a little bit, maybe look like a little bit more of a beanstalk, but it's your health. Do what you will. As long as you're still within the sphere of LeBron James, it's probably going to be good for a few more years. Might want to find a new teat to go out there and drink that sweet, sweet life-giving milk off of. But for now, looking good in LeBron James camp over there. Outside of that, though, oh yeah, LeBron James not gonna retire. At least not this year. I think he'll probably at least try and play another year. But you look at that foot injury he had, probably going to need surgery. He was talking about some sort of torn ligament or whatever. I don't know if it was the plantar fascia or if it's some other obscure bone ligament in the foot. I don't know. It's injured. It was the same injury that he had earlier in this, or I guess late in the season, that people were questioning whether he's going to come back from. He did come back for the playoffs, played fairly well in the playoffs, all things considered, but surgery at 38, 39 years old by the time next season rolls around, never guarantee that he comes back and is still good. So, I mean, I think he will be solid for at least another year or two, but I think he's going to have to have it. I think he's going to have an objectively bad year before he decides to walk away. This wasn't it. I don't think next year's going to be it either. So he's going to still probably, I'm not going to get into the mind of LeBron James. It's a nebulous path to go down, but it feels like he wants to play until he's 40. I know he definitely wants to play, if not on the same team, in the league with his son. If his son even gets in the league, I mean, he's going to be a backup on USC's team next year. So I don't know. Bench players have been lottery picks before, but I feel like his dad has not done him a whole lot of favors as far as the hype train is concerned. But that is all to say, I think LeBron James is going to stick around for another year or two. So it's a big old nothing story. I don't want to take away any shine from the Denver Nuggets because they are spectacular. Nikola Jokic, I'm absolutely walking back what I was saying about him being the second best player. He is the best player in the league. His offense is so much better than what Giannis Antetokounmpo puts out there that the defense is almost de minimis at this point. It's average enough to not offset the crazy historically efficient numbers that Nikola Jokic puts up on the offensive side of the ball. So he's the best player in the league right now. The big man renaissance is upon us. Victor Wembanyama is about to do that a little bit more in a bit of a different way, because really, he's less of a Jokic type of player at 7'5". He's more of a taller KD. Kevin Durant is 7 foot tall, plays like a shooting guard pretty much, and that is the mold that really Victor Wembanyama has molded his game off of. He's slim. I mean, as Bomani Jones is trying to coin the nickname right now, because if he showed up at any other court, this is in the words of Bomani Jones, if he showed up at just some random pickup court, you know that he's going to be called slim by whoever is at the court. And that's just, I mean, that's fair. That is fair. You ever seen a picture of Victor Wembanyama? He is a skinny boy. I mean, 7'5", but skinny is as skinny gets to a certain extent. You can put meat on that frame, but neither here nor there. Nikola Jokic is probably the best player in the NBA right now, just patiently awaiting him, Jamal Murray, the whole crew just patiently awaiting what happens in this Game 7. So without further ado, roughly 10 minutes into this podcast, let me kick it over to my future self to talk a little bit about the Heat and the Celtics and how that whole Game 7 turned out and who won that series, who's going to be playing in the finals versus the Denver Nuggets. Take it away, future Caleb. All right, and don't be fooled by the immense amount of light in this room. I just turned on the overhead light. It is the stark middle of the night. I am recording this just after Game 7 of the Sixers, definitely not the Sixers. Celtics versus Heat just wrapped up. I am currently staring at the audio as it crawls along, and that's just distracting, man. Well, I would say move it over to the other screen, but the other screen's not on. Either way, if you are a Heat fan, you can exhale. You did not blow it in historic fashion. I mean, Nosferatu, the man himself, Adam Silver, he was there in person. He sent his two best soldiers in Tony Brothers and Scott Foster to get the job done and get the Celtics to the finals. It didn't work. The Heat win. They win handily, too, in Game 7. Jason Tatum early got an ankle injury that kind of hobbled him for the rest of the game. You could see him kind of, not really being sure on that ankle for the rest of the game after he sustained it in like the first minute. And not the greatest way to do it, but it wasn't like Jimmy Butler had a great game either. I think he shot like close to 30 shots, ended up with 27 points, something like that, 25, 27 points. Truthfully, with like a minute and a half left, I was like, all right, this thing is wrapped up. I'm going to walk the dog so I can record, get this thing edited, upload it, do all that sort of stuff, and then just go straight to bed pretty much. Yeah, it's late at night, at least for me. 11 o'clock is late for me. I am an old man, and I will readily admit that. But with that said, with all of the pandemonium that went on, I mean, being down 3 or being up 3-0 at one point were the Heat, and then losing 3 straight. All they had to do was win 1 of 4, though, and they did that in Game 7. Probably would have been a little bit more satisfying to do it in Game 6 on their own home court, but, beggars can't be choosers. They get it done in 7. They're probably absolutely tired as hell, and not necessarily something you want to do when you're facing off in the next round in the NBA Finals versus the best team in the entire dance, like I was just talking about with the Denver Nuggets coming up. And, talking about that matchup a little bit, I think Bam Adebayo presents an interesting sort of defensive matchup for Nikola Jokic. That being said, talked about it a little bit earlier in this here podcast. One of the most efficient players that the NBA has ever seen on offense, Nikola Jokic. I think he will probably end up giving Bam Adebayo all the hands, all the work in the world. They're going to need guys like Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent to step up. Certainly going to need Jimmy Butler to step up in the next round, and I'm still not sure it's going to be enough. But I've doubted the Heat in literally every round up until this point. So who's to say? Well, I guess I don't know if I doubted. Well, actually, no. I'm going to keep walking that forward. I did doubt them in the second round. I thought the Knicks would ultimately pull away in that series, and they ended up losing in 5. They go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they face off against the Boston Celtics, and then they end up winning that in 7. Made it interesting, but ended up winning it in 7. So, I mean, hey, stranger things have happened in this playoffs alone. You never know. Maybe an injury happens or something like that, and the whole thing gets derailed for the Nuggets. But I said it before, I'll say it again. Anything less than a title at this point is a little bit disappointing. I wouldn't say it's a failure, but it's definitely a little bit disappointing if you are a Nuggets fan. This is the year. They have got to get it done. This is probably the best opportunity they're going to get with this core to win a championship. So I think the Denver Nuggets end up pulling this one off. And you know what? I'll give the Heat credit. They are a scrappy team. They have gotten to places that I frankly did not think they would go. As far as getting this thing out there, getting all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, beating every opponent in front of them, like I did not think that they would do. And, I mean, I said they had a chance at the beginning of this series, but I didn't think that they would jump out to a 3-0 lead, almost cough it up, admittedly, but end up closing that thing out, getting to the NBA Finals. And one of the most improbable runs of all time. That being said, for the Nuggets, this is the team you're going up against. You got to get the job done. That's at that bottom line. No excuses. This is the best opportunity you're going to get. Pretty much get a title and then go from there. That's the goal at this point. And the Nuggets have been the most focused team in this entire playoffs. They've been playing with a purpose because this is a squad that's been knocking at the door for a couple of years now. And I mean, with Jamal Murray in the lineup, with Michael Porter Jr. healthy, That's just not, both of those guys being healthy at the same time is just not something you can count on year in, year out. You got to get it done this time because you don't know if you're going to get this opportunity again. I'm looking forward to seeing him try, honestly. It's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be a good NBA Finals. It depends just how well the Denver Nuggets are playing and how good of a game plan Spoelstra puts out for the Heat. It could end up being a 5-game gentleman sweep if I had to guess in one way for the Denver Nuggets. Could end up being a long series, and then maybe the Heat pull it out with some antics there in the end. But I do think, unlike the Eastern Conference Finals, where I have no idea why the ESPN analytics thought so highly of the Celtics, even when they were down like 3-0, those ESPN analytics were still like, still like a 40% chance to win this series, even down 3-0, which they did win 3 straight, so maybe there is something to that to a certain extent, but saying that the Heat had a 3% chance to win the series at the beginning was obviously grossly inaccurate, and also how do you come up with that? I digress. The Nuggets are not the Celtics, though, is what I'm trying to get at. The Nuggets are an absolute juggernaut. Like I said, they've been knocking at the door for quite some time, and this just feels like the year that they're going to do it. So looking forward to the NBA Finals, tipping off on Thursday, 8:30 p.m. And with that, I think I'm pretty much done talking about the NBA at this point. So let's kick it back to past Caleb a little bit. Well, still coming off work, so not necessarily rested, but more rested than me at night. I'm going to bed. Take it away, future Caleb. And I just absolutely blasted through my carbonated, caffeinated beverage of choice, so I had to go in, call in reinforcements from the fridge a couple feet away. Well, I had to walk down the hall and get a new beverage. That's what I'm trying to say. So welcome back. Thank you for that riveting analysis, future Caleb. Almost said past Caleb. It is past in this podcast sense, but it's in the future in a more of a real sense. That's some real Inception, time is a flat circle bullshit for you right there. But I digress. Again, this is the least structured episode of all time. You're witnessing it here live. Well, not live, but pre-recorded on this podcast and or YouTube channel. Subscribe wherever you're listening. Just a quick reminder there, you sweet, sweet son of a bitch, you. Anyways, I just got some headlines on my phone here. I'm just going to read down the list, and we are going to call it a day. Really not a whole lot happening. Just, a couple NFL headlines here and there. Most of them coming from the league meetings. That was the biggest thing going on last week, outside of one personnel move, but you've already heard about that. We'll get to that in just a second. First and foremost, let's talk about in that caffeinated carbonate, more the carbonation than the caffeination catching up to me right there with a quick little burp. But with that, almost got another one there. Let's talk about the fair catch rule first and foremost. If you didn't hear about it, allow me to elaborate a little bit. It's not simply just you call a fair catch and you get the ball is dead right there. They do that on a punt. They've done it on a punt for like a long time. What the NFL did over this past week is they adopted the college football style of that rule, where I'm not sure if they did it on punts. Probably should have looked it up beforehand. But again, least prepared episode of all time at this point, so it is what it is. At the very least on kickoffs, though, they're adopting the college rule, whereas whenever the NFL, I guess, 10 years ago, from anywhere from 7 to 10 years ago, they moved the kick up from the 30 to the 35-yard line, and that ended up, making it so touchbacks were through the roof pretty much. If you had a kicker with a big leg and you wanted to kick it back through the end zone, all the way out of the end zone every single time you wanted to. Like if you got a Harrison Butker on your team, you can kick that sucker right out the back of the end zone every time. Never ever get a return out of that. But a lot of other special teams units, especially special teams units that really trust the coverage, the guys going down there to tackle, they over that intermittent period for the last 7 to 10 years, again, whenever they instituted that last rule change, they ended up kicking a lot of kickoffs shorter, like anywhere from the, usually within the 5-yard line, something like that, just so you couldn't take a knee, force them to return. And then, hopefully if your coverage team is good, they would go down, get a tackle before the 25-yard line, because that's another change that they did. I guess that was only a couple years ago. They changed the touchback from the 20 to the 25. So instead of the 25-yard line in those cases, Now you'd be, in the either at the 20, maybe inside the 20 if you got a really good run down there to tackle him. It was all gamesmanship though, but you could do that with the old rules. Now with the new rules, I think if it's a fair catch inside the 20, or maybe I think it's just a fair catch in general, actually. On a fly ball, if you call a fair catch on the live ball in the kickoff, that is a touchback. Automatic touchback. It goes out to the 25-yard line. And if you didn't hear, allow me to tell you, every single special teams coordinator in the entire league was opposed to this. It was a unanimous opposal by all parties. No one wanted this. And I think they're probably going to try and find ways to fight it in any way that they could. This was not a popular move at all. This was the competition committee saying, we're going to try and get rid of the kickoff as much as we possibly can. Because, call it what it is. This is just trying to get rid of the kickoff play. They hate it. They don't like to see it. I know the competition committee kind of, put some lipstick on that pig by saying, this is not a permanent solution. We want to find a more permanent solution, make the play safer. I understand that from a liability perspective, you're thinking about concussions and all that stuff. And hey, maybe there are more concussions on kickoffs. I think the data doesn't necessarily bear that out, just based on watching film a lot of times. I think there's a lot. Just from the way I've heard it posited, sometimes you just have concussions that pop up during a game. They aren't diagnosed during a game, but a guy comes into the facility maybe the day after that maybe, and it's just like, oh man, I am dizzy, I can't focus, my head hurts, and they're like, oh, he got a concussion. Do you know where he got it? Not really. And then that leaves whoever's recording what play the concussion was recorded on, gives them the liberty to say, oh, well, this one was on a kickoff. Why not? Seems like a likely spot. They were on special teams. Could be any sorts of, he got some snaps on defense, got some snaps on the punt team as well. But hey, you know what? He did it on the kickoff. We're just going to put it over there just to not think about it, just forget about it. I don't know. It doesn't feel like this rule change is going to necessarily, and this is something I'm kind of straight up borrowing from Mike Florio, fellow Vikings fan, so shout out to Mike Florio out there. As I believe Eagles GM, Howie Roseman, that's the one. Howie Roseman called him top 5 conspiracy theorists in the NFL, so hey, welcome. You fit right in with the Vikings fan base. But surprisingly crazy people on the Twitter sphere. I had no idea up until this past year just how insane these guys are. But I digress on that from Mike Florio pretty much. And I think it's a valid point he's making. He pretty much, not he in particular, the league pretty much just made the play so you get less returns, sure, but you're still getting guys running down there. You're still getting them hitting each other at full speed. Even if there is probably going to be a fair catch called, you can't just assume the fair catch is going to be called, so you got to run down there and cover the kick. It didn't make the play safer. It just made it so there's less returns pretty much. And I guess if your argument is a lot of the concussions are happening at the point of attack on the tackle, maybe I would love to see you have the statistics bear that out, because if so, they would have quoted that by now. I am entirely sure, because that would have made their point right there. But let me say, this just feels like something where they're just trying to get rid of the kickoff, and I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I am interested to see how. I'm interested to see just how these special teams units play this right now, because these coaches are objectively unhappy with this decision. They hate this with a fiery, burning passion from what I've seen on basically every medium. When you're unanimously against something, seems a lot like nobody likes it. Just a 32-0. That nothing speaks pretty loud, especially when you're talking about 32 teams that view just about everything differently when you get right down to it in a lot of situations. This feels like one of those things where they're going to try and find a way around the rule, and I am interested to see how they do that. Are they going to evolve the squib kick a little bit more so it's harder to catch and somehow rolls within the 10-yard line? Still forcing a return? Maybe. Outside of that, do they try and kick some low line drives away from the returner? Maybe try and get some action out of that. I have no idea what they're going to try to do, but I'm interested to see how they try to do it, because I can guarantee you right now it's either going to be a gentleman's agreement between sides that you're just not going to call fair catch, which, listen, this is, to use an old historical geopolitical term here, this is mutually assured destruction. If one team just starts calling fair catches, that whole honor system falls apart, and this is a try to get an edge any way you can sort of business. Some teams are going to be calling the fair catches, I can almost guarantee you, which means every team is going to call the fair catches if they get the opportunity to. That's just how this thing plays out generally. But I think they're going to try everything in their power to force guys to return kicks, even if they really don't want to. I think they're going to try and force returns any way they possibly can. I think the squib kick is going to be big this year just based on how they execute. I feel like they might have to change some things up, practice it a little bit more, but that's probably going to be, if you want to force a return, that's going to be the way to force a return at this point, now that they've instituted this kickoff rule at this point. I've talked about this entirely too much, though, because that is not the only thing that happened at the league meetings. A couple other headlines here. Thursday Night Football's flex scheduling. John Mara, I'm not usually one to agree with owners, so I mean this was a nice, refreshing take from an owner here, but I think it was John Mara of the New York Giants called it abusive towards the players, and that's pretty much right on the head. I understand flexing from Sunday in the afternoon to Sunday night, or hell, from Sunday to Monday at that rate even. I mean, it is a little, even Sunday to Monday, though, is a change in the schedule that is, you got to adjust to it. It's a whole other, you're shifting your entire work week a whole day at that point. So it is still an adjustment. Shifting from Monday night to Thursday night, or even Sunday night to Thursday night, any of those is just, you have completely destroyed and warped how they were planning on going throughout the week. The players hate the short weeks. I'll tell you that right now. It's been well documented. The players hate the short weeks, and you're not getting 100% players because they're still sore from the previous game. They just started being able to walk around the facility the day before the game. They're not really getting any good practice in leading up to these Thursday night games. So you're just getting more of that. It's not just the quality of the teams that has made these Thursday night games bad. It is, these guys are banged up. They need that whole week of preparation just to get ready to get back on the field again. I absolutely hate this. The one silver lining is that was obviously taken into account the impact on the work week. You're never going to change the fact that it's a short week, 1 week, and you get some fake mini bye after that. It's, you can't really change that at all. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. NFL doesn't care. They're a bunch of greedy, money-hungry whores over there. So it's to be expected. But at the very least, they had the common decency to go out there and say, hey, we'll give you a whole month of preparation first off at the very least. I think it's 28 days, like a 4-week time period. They say, like, all right, go out there, go do your thing, prepare. This is coming up a month down the road, give you a month heads up so you can alter your schedule accordingly and at least kind of mitigate the impact of that. I do still hate the rule, though, so that's bottom line there. Outside of that, holding the NFL 2025 draft in Green Bay, that's a thing that passed over the course of the league meetings there. And I've just got a couple questions. First and foremost, weather. Beginning of May in Wisconsin is not the most, how should I say, consistent time as far as the weather is concerned. In many of those northern states and Midwestern states, it's a bit of a crapshoot what you're getting in early May, late April, especially in the late April side of that. Hell, even up in Maryland, there were times in early May where it was abjectly miserable outside. Usually the weather would clear up by then, but every so often you get a day in there where it's just terrible. You can't feel your hands. You're trying to throw shot put and you just can't feel where it's going. Maybe that's more of a personal thing than anything else, but I digress on that front. In Wisconsin, you get some miserable days in that time of the year. It may be spring on paper. Spring does not arrive in the Midwest, specifically in Wisconsin, until way in the middle of May, and even then, you're probably going to have to wait till June to get consistently warm weather. And you know what? I went over to Wisconsin, I believe in June a couple years back, and they still had a day where it was 40 degrees, cloudy, and just, you had to wear a hoodie outside because it was windy and miserable. That is how Wisconsin goes. Obviously, they got lucky in Kansas City this past year, though I think it was raining, and it is, Kansas City in that same time of year, so who's to say? Green Bay, Wisconsin's a totally different animal, man. There is a real chance that the guys on stage at the draft have to wear like gloves and winter clothing because it is just that cold and windy outside. That's just the way it is in Green Bay, man. So that's my first question. How are we preparing for the weather, and how are these prospects feeling that have worked their entire lives to get to this point? They are attending the draft, and it is fucking cold, man. Like, no two ways about it. It is ridiculously cold. How are they going to feel about that whole thing out there? That, their dream was to, sit in comfort, at least for this one night before they get back to work with whoever they start working with that following day whenever they are drafted. It's a beautiful moment. You're supposed to be comfortable in that moment. But this time, you might be a little bit cold. So, good luck with that. That's my first question. My second question, and the one that was more prevalent in the online discussion, the hotels, it's a well-known fact there in Green Bay that it is a town of a couple 100,000. Not really a whole lot of lodging space in there. Maybe you get some people renting their place out as Airbnbs if they don't necessarily go to the games. Maybe, people come in town to go to the Packers games. So I'm sure many people can make a killing renting their house out during those times. And I imagine there's a good portion of the Green Bay population that just goes on down the street to whatever pub, stays with a family friend for the weekend. They drink beers, they go to the bar, they play Shake-a-Day over there, and they find their way, do their thing, and they make some money along the way while still watching the Packers on the TV and eating cheese, brats, and beer, all that sort of stuff. Did I get all the Wisconsin Midwestern references in there that I could? Maybe. Well, let's see if we can get even more in there. I don't even know, though, what you're supposed to do with the lodging situation, though, because there is not enough hotel space. Are they gonna be doing like the Qatar World Cup, where they're just gonna be shipping in workers from the Punjab to go out here and build the hotels from scratch out there for them? Is that what we're doing? I mean, we got a pretty condensed timeline here. I mean, it's 2023. We got 2 years to get these things done, and that's not exactly an ideal time frame to go out there and get some good work done. I feel like you're going to be skirting some building codes right there. And you know what? If it's anything like the Qatar World Cup, you're going to have a couple thousand bodies you're building on top of. If there's anything that Qin Shi Huangdi taught us in China when building the Great Wall, it's that, organic material makes good mortar. So that's good. You can always do that. But if you're trying to not skirt around human rights, I have no idea where you house all of those peoples. Do you just bring in a whole horde of trailers for people to sleep in? Do you basically just make gourmet is not the right word, luxury homeless encampments? I'm not entirely sure what you do to accommodate the sheer volume of people that comes to an NFL draft. It is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that come to these NFL drafts. I think it was like 200,000 at the Nashville draft a couple years back. I think it was something in north of 100,000 at this year's draft in Kansas City. How are you going to accommodate all of those people? Should be interesting to figure out. Won't even probably think about that until it's happening in 2 years' time, but hopefully they get it figured out, because that could be real thorny very, very easily. With that, though, let me get a quick drink of this. Oh yeah, that is good sauce right there. That is some good sauce. Got to allow time for the burp to get through. Disgusting sniffle there, and we are right back into it. Up next, we have got some personnel stuff going on, and talking about a couple personnel things on the NFL side before we get over to the NBA side of things, to talk of a few updates and stuff like that. Oh, also got an ownership thing as well, but we'll get to it when we get to it. I'm probably bloviating a little bit too much in this headline segment, so let's keep this thing moving. First and foremost, the big news in the personnel department, the one that you probably heard of if you follow anything offseason related in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins, Cardinals wide receiver, really was an elite wide receiver with the Texans when he was able to stay healthy consistently. Still got a little bit of that in him, but he was released by the Cardinals this past week. It is a big old 22 million plus cap hit on the Cardinals this year, but off the books next year. And now he would have been the top wide receiver on the market if he would have just been a straight up free agent. I think he's probably a better free agent buy than what DJ Chark was. And he gets into it late. He gets into it, I don't know when it actually goes into effect. Well, I think it's official now. He's probably negotiating with teams. News as to where he's going to sign will probably come down over the next week or so, maybe even a little bit more. I mean, why should DeAndre Hopkins be in any hurry to sign at this point? It's not like he's trying to beat everyone out in the market. And like I just said, he would have been the top wide receiver on the market if he would have just been a straight up regular free agent whenever this whole thing kicked off. He probably would have already signed someplace well in the past at this point. But I guess from a Cardinals perspective, they clearly did not get anything they wanted in a trade request or anything like that, or a trade deal rather. Excuse me again. But yeah, if they got a good trade request at this point, a good trade offer, they probably would have traded DeAndre Hopkins at this point. But I guess that's kind of where the sticking point is. I guess nobody wanted him in a trade deal, knowing that the Cardinals probably weren't going to keep him or something along those lines. Either way, whatever happens to be, DeAndre Hopkins can now sign wherever he wants. The team picking him up does not have to worry about that contract, because that was a big sticking point as well. I think the main reason he wasn't going to be traded for is he has had a series of injuries and he's got a big price tag. And if he plays at the top of his height, or the top of his height, that crazy how that all works. At the top of his abilities, if he plays at that, I do think he's still got some juice left in the tank. He's still one of the better wide receivers in the league. The problem is you just don't get that very much, because the last couple of years, he's only played a limited amount of games. He's been very good in the games that he has played, but it's always something. It's either a hamstring, ankle, knee, something along those lines. I mean, it's just kind of... He played all those games consecutively with the Texans, played through all sorts of stuff, I would imagine, to be out there year after year. There were years-long stretches where he just did not miss a game with the Texans. And you can do that Iron Man streak, and you can do it very well if you're a quarterback particularly, because there are ways that you can avoid contact and just simply not get injured. It's harder to do that when you're a wide receiver, and you do kind of have to... put some things in the back burner. Eventually it comes to roost, though, and you got to pay the piper. I feel like that's kind of what DeAndre Hopkins' body is doing right now. I'm not sure you want him to play a role where he is consistently being the number one guy out there for you, but I do think you put him on a contender right now with an already very good offense. He can step in there, easily be a number two, even a number three if you need him to be, but there's very few situations where he would step in and be a number three. I think the only one I can think of off the top of my head is probably the Bengals, and Mike Brown's cheap ass ain't signing DeAndre Hopkins. That's simply not going to happen. If he did, that'd be cool. That would be real fun. But he's not going to do that. That's simply not what he's going to do. It's probably going to be, if I had to guess, Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, one of those. He's going to a contender. At this point, why would you sign with anyone else but a contender? He's been with the Texans and Cardinals thus far. This man is way too good. He's a future Hall of Famer for sure. He is way too good to not be playing for championships at this point. So he's going to go to a contender somewhere, someone that's going to be on a playoff team, whether that be in the NFC or the AFC. Probably going to be the AFC at this point if I had to guess, but who's to say? I'm looking forward to seeing where he signs, though. Looking forward to seeing what that price point is, just from a morbid fascination with the financial aspects of the whole thing. It'll tell you a lot about what the market kind of thought about him going in, whether they were thinking he was going to be a top flight money sort of guy or what. Obviously not, or otherwise they would have traded for him. But I digress on that front. I'm kind of talking in circles now. But DeAndre Hopkins getting released by the Cardinals. Probably going to sign here in the next week or so, if I had to guess. Someone's going to give him a decent enough offer. I don't know. He might even take a discount just to play for a contender here, one of these teams. But interested to see where he ends up. He could be a championship piece for one of those teams that I just mentioned. Hell, maybe even some teams I'm not even thinking of right now. Who's to say? Maybe he shocks everyone, just goes down to the Miami Dolphins, wants to play with Tua or something like that. That could be interesting. He doesn't necessarily fit the profile of that team, but you fit in a player like DeAndre Hopkins. That's all I got to say on that. Moving on to the next story, though. This was an interesting one. This one kind of again, Mike Florio shed some light on this throughout the course of last week. Jimmy G, in the physical, you may remember, I don't think I necessarily talked about it on the show, but there was a little bit of a delay when Jimmy G was announced that he was going to the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders. That's a few years old. The Las Vegas Raiders. That's where he ended up going to. But there was a little bit of a lull between when he was announced to be signing with the Las Vegas Raiders. Almost said it again. And when he actually signed that contract, and there was a little bit of what's going on. Why is this thing happening? Apparently, Jimmy G had it. Well, we all knew that Jimmy G had a foot injury. It's the reason why he was out for the last part of the season last year. That foot injury did not heal properly when it was surgically repaired to end his season last year. So he goes to the Raiders. He fails the physical, has to go get another surgery to get that repaired. And as a result, that, caused a bit of a delay, because if I'm signing a guy and he is clearly injured, he failed a physical, you know what, that increases the risk factor a little bit, so you got to come back to the negotiating table. And they did not change the overall numbers of the deal, but what they did do is they put in some clauses, right? So first and foremost, I think it's kind of a two-pronged clause. First is if he does not pass a physical by the time the regular season starts, they can cut him. I mean, just totally void the contract. Cut them all null and void. They don't know anything. There's no messy dead cap hits, nothing like that. He is just gone. They don't have to worry about it, and that makes sense. Also, I think if he does not finish the season healthy, don't quote me on this. I'm not very good at reading legalese here, but I think if he does not finish the season healthy, I think they can also cut him with no sort of dead cap hits or anything like that. So it went from a relatively rich deal for Jimmy G to one that's fairly team friendly. It covers their asses pretty well from the injury perspective. And that's really, outside of the questionable decision making at times, Jimmy G, the one thing you're looking for and the one thing you're dreading on a weekly basis is whether he's going to get hurt for you. If you got an offensive mind in there like a Josh McDaniels or a Kyle Shanahan like he's had the last several years, and those are the only two offensive coordinators he's had in the NFL, by the way. Crazy to think about, but I digress. If you got a guy like that running the offense, though, back on point, you can kind of work around what Jimmy G does. He does. If you can just set him up to get good open passes, he'll hit them every single time for the most part. And there are games where he really did that, where you need him to go out there and kind of win a game for you. Doesn't always do that on a consistent basis. When you need him to create and go out there and just be a beast, that's not necessarily his game. But if you put him in a good offense, he can really run that thing very well. When you got a group of weapons like they've got over there with the Raiders, I think he can play very well. But always a little bit of an injury concern with Jimmy G. So that new contract stipulation goes in there. Feels like something that may be very, very relevant. We will have to monitor that situation over the course of the next few months. See if he gets healthy by training camp. If he does fail a physical before the regular season starts, what does that mean? Do they actually go ahead with the cut? Because if they do, who else is on the market? It's a pretty sad list right now. I think that the headliner is like Teddy Bridgewater. So probably just going to roll with who you got right now, right? It couldn't hurt to just keep him around for a little bit, but I don't know. That's going to be a situation that's brewing and bubbling as we get closer to the season without any word on a physical, so we'll put a pin in that for now. Up next, the owners want a better cash debt mix for the Josh Harris group offer. Basically, what that means is they got too much in loans from the bank right now to fund this deal. The league wants a little bit more cash that is spoken for, like say, sell off some assets, add in some like actual cash, and not actual, it's actual cash either way, but cash that's not owned by someone else, cash that does not have a lien on it from the bank, if you will. So understandable, they're going to get that thing done. It didn't pass at the Minnesota League meetings, but Josh Harris is a rich man, and you got a bunch of people in that group. You sell off some assets, you get some more cash in there. It's not the biggest thing in the world. It's just, the assets aren't working for you, but they kind of are because you're going into NFL ownership, which basically only makes money. So I don't know. That feels like something that's it's going to get figured out. Also, related to that, Bitdefender, get out of here. I don't need an update right now on my Bitdefender. You can tell me about that later. And then you can also suck on D's nuts while you're at it. Anyways, speaking of the commies, do you remember I talked briefly about this scam artist Brian Davis getting in there last minute? Talking about, oh man, I'm going to get in here and own an NFL team. Known scammer. He's done this on plenty of occasions where he has falsified documents, done some real Firefest bullshit, trying to make people think he had more money than he actually did, gets popped for fraud. I think he's actually been, I don't know if he's been convicted of fraud before, but he is a known notorious fraudster. Shocker of the century, he lied about having $5 million in bank deposits. Bank of America testified under oath today, or I don't know who, someone from Bank of America testified under oath the other day that, yeah, those were shown to be fraudulent. Those are not real. That's fake money. That's funny money. And I'm not even talking about cryptocurrency. It just didn't exist. Just didn't exist at all. So the known scammer was trying to perpetuate yet another scam. That's just hilarious. I mean, that is a pathological level of lying that I don't fully understand because I do not possess that in my own brain. But how did you think that no one would find that out? Like, you think you're just going to be like there's a good 30 for 30 on it. Some guy tried to buy the Islanders, was basically same sort of situation, except for they actually believed he had the money. So it got all the way to the point where I think the deal might have been approved. And then the guy was like, oh shit, I didn't think it would get this far. I actually don't have money. So, yeah, this is awkward. Brian Davis tried to do that, except for he'd already gotten popped for fraud once. And this isn't like the 70s or 80s like that one story from the other guy trying to buy the Islanders. This is 2023. Pretty easy to look up the past transgressions you've had just via a quick internet search that you just go through. So you're like, oh yeah, him and Christian Laettner had a thing. Christian Laettner, who's to say if he was the scammer or the scammy? I don't know. But he was part of that. Been known, really, fellow Duke grabbed the Christian Laettner, by the way, this Brian Davis. But this is one of those things where, yeah, he's had a long track record of trying to scam. And what do you know? He tried to scam once again. That's just hilarious. Could have seen that one coming from a mile away because they were even going into that. He didn't even really set it up well, like showing a legitimate place where he could have gotten $5 billion. There was just straight up through SEC filings or anything like that. Nothing at all that would indicate that he even had anything sniffing $1 billion in net worth, let alone add 4 onto that. Just not happening at all. Funny as hell that he thought that this might work, though. I mean, this is just high class. Pathological liars will lie. Can't really control that at the end of the day. We're getting right down here to it at this point. Back to some NBA headlines here real quick to wrap it up. First off, well, actually, you know what? We'll talk about the coaches first off. That last one's just a fun story to end off with. So, talk about some head coach hiring. The Sixers hired Nick Nurse. And the Bucks also hired Adrian Griffin or Griffith. I can't remember which one it is. I think they were both on the Toronto Raptors staff, I want to say, though. Unless I'm misremembering what was going on there. I want to say Adrian Griffin was a assistant on the Toronto Raptors staff. I don't know. Either way, he comes with the Giannis stamp of approval. I obviously have no idea who that guy is. Good luck. I mean, as long as you can manage personalities and as long as you are good out of a timeout, He can probably stick around. I think Darvin Ham's probably going to stick around with the Lakers for at least a little bit longer because he can do both of those things. Nick Nurse going to the Sixers. Listen, I know he's won a championship, but so did Doc Rivers, and I wouldn't say a similar situation, but Kawhi Leonard did have one of the greatest postseasons of all time the year that the Raptors won the NBA Finals. Also had Pascal Siakam on that team. It's, worthwhile to question just how much Nick Nurse did on that team. And really ever since then, he's been just not at the bottom of the East. But with I'm not going to say the Raptors roster was blow the doors off great, but they did still have Pascal Siakam. And, with that, Pascal Siakam, a couple good young players in there as well. Masai Ujiri is still a good drafter over there. He's been very good at turning those late first-round guys into really solid players. I feel like you could at least get, a mid-seed here and there. He's usually in, the 8-seed bubble sort of situation, play-in tournament area ever since that's been instituted since COVID after that title run that he had in 2019. I'm just not sure how much of an upgrade that Nick Nurse is to Doc Rivers. I mean, maybe he'll be a little bit better with the personalities, so maybe he'll be able to manage what the Sixers got over there a little bit better. I got no idea, but what I do know is that I just don't know with that core over there with the 76ers without significant additions in the periphery, whether you're even going to win a title with that without an elite coach, and I'm just not sure Nick Nurse is an elite coach at this time. So who's to say? Well, I mean, they'll probably just fire these guys in a year or two anyways. It is the way of the NBA, I suppose. I mean, I guess that's kind of an unfair characterization of the Sixers and the Bucks because both of them stuck with the guys they had. I mean, hell, the Bucks won a title with Mike Budenholzer. I mean, Mike Budenholzer, look, he won a title, but you just can't have the way that series ended against the Heat and keep your job. You can't defend some of those decisions and, holding timeouts for no apparent reason when you really could have used them at various points in the game late. Just not being good out of timeouts when it comes to drawing up plays or anything like that. Mike Budenholzer did not have a good showing down the stretch, and I think of the firings this offseason, I understand him and Doc Rivers probably the most, I would say. So, I mean, both of these teams, and, they kept Doc Rivers around there for, I think, 3 seasons. They kept Mike Budenholzer in with Milwaukee for a while up there. So, hey, maybe they'll get a couple of years to kind of figure some things out, but better figure it out quick. It is still the NBA, and head coach almost as dispensable as a running back in the NFL right now. So, hey, have to see how it goes for them. Good luck to you, especially Nick Nurse. You have got a full plate of bullshit to work through and sift through. So, yeah, good luck once again. As the final headline of this episode, as we bring this thing to a close, should be about roughly an hour or so by the time I add in that final little cut of the post Game 7 analysis there of the Eastern Conference Series and the finals as a whole. So, hey, nice little shortish episode for you, assuming I don't go absolutely out of my mind bloviating in circles like I am wont to do. But let's talk about one fun story to get us out the door, shall we? NBA ref Eric Lewis refereed over 1,000 regular season games, also 82 playoff games to this point in his career. One of the higher rated refs in the entire league. He is being investigated by the NBA and I think suspended right now from officiating for defending his and others' officiating throughout the course of the season, or probably throughout a couple years, via a burner account. He is the Brian Colangelo of the officials, if you will. If you remember talking about the 76ers, Brian Colangelo used to run that team, and then he found out that allegedly his wife was the one running the burner account. That feels like a shitty thing to do to your wife, but obviously didn't help him get another job, but I digress there. But the whole story there was someone was out on the streets sharing confidential medical information via a burner account, going out there defending players, defending personnel decisions, crashing players on his own team. That's what Brian Colangelo was doing back in the day. Eric Lewis, maybe not trashing other officials like Brian Colangelo was to his players on his own team, but what he did do was, whenever there was some animus towards the officials, you can probably name about 1,000 times in the last year, can't you, that an official messed up and people were coming down from every side of the aisle saying these guys absolutely stink, they suck, they need to reform the referees. I think a little bit of that is overblown in the NBA. NFL, you may have a few points there, and again, make the refs full-time employees. We don't have to rehash that whole thing, but what I will say with Eric Lewis, at the very least, he was ride or die for his troop, man. He was ride or die for his fellow officials out there, going out there saying, hey, yeah, maybe that could have been a block or a charge, but you know what? We did a good job. This is what happened. And the account was deleted before this actually got found out by the public. So I can't go back and just see what the replies were. I'd love to see some of the replies, but I imagine that, it's one of those blocker charge things where it's like, yeah, we did this, all right? So get off our ass and go on your own merry way, not thinking for a second that someone in the league office wouldn't be like, hey, that's actually correct information that you could only attain from being on the court at that time. Maybe this is a referee, because no one on the teams is going to go out there defending the referees at this point. It's so much animus between the players, the coaches, and the referees at this point. Maybe more animus than just about any other time in the NBA's history at this point. But yeah, I just love the idea. I would assume he's not the only NBA ref to do this as well. He's just the only one that got caught doing it. But I just love the idea of the refs going out there being like, you know what, we can't talk about officiating in the public. Because that's the problem with this in the NBA's eyes, is you can't talk about officiating in the public eye. You get fined for it if you're a player or your coach, let alone if you are a referee, I suppose. You can't criticize officiating one way or the other. And that's pretty much what he did in this one. So I do just love the idea of an NBA ref just going out there being like, hey, I'm not wrong, you're wrong. You're wrong right now. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. And with that is all for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed, God bless your heart, man. This was. I mean, it was an okay episode, I suppose. I think I kept it mostly on course. Stuttered around for a lot of it, but you know what? We're in that post-work glow, if you will. And by glow, I mean just dim little light, because I am tired right now, ladies and gentlemen. But if you did enjoy, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating so we can grow this bad boy a little bit. If you didn't enjoy it, take that opinion to the grave. Never tell anyone in your entire life, because I'll find you guys. I swear I will. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. It's just Unqualified Analysis. I'll put a link down in the description of the podcast season. You can go to subscribe to that. If you're already watching on the YouTube, you don't need that. Just click the subscribe button down below the video. It's even easier for you than it is for the people on the podcast right now. But either way, trying to grow that one a little bit as well, the YouTube channel. So yeah, subscribe to that. I release one episode per week until the football season is back in full swing during the offseason. Really no telling what I'm going to get into on any given week. So, could be good, could be terrible, could just be fun, could just have a fun time. Tune in to find out, I suppose. That's my sales pitch from me to you, the loyal listener and or viewer at this point. Follow me on all my socials at Caleb Verzak. Link will be in the description so you have to spell my fucked up Eastern Bloc name. I did the hard work for you so you don't have to do it for yourself at home. And if you want to contact the show, either shoot me a DM on Twitter or email me at unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. That's unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. Just put either business or show in the subject line to start so you can be categorized accordingly. And with that, thank you so much for tuning into Unqualified Analysis. As always, I've got no clue what I'm talking about, but one thing I learned this week, which I didn't actually learn this week, but we're going to pretend I did, is that there were really only 8 bank robberies from 1859 to 1900, the quote-unquote Wild West era. Also, the Western movie trope is pretty much entirely made up by Hollywood. That's just just the way it was. I believe, nope, that's a different one, different sort of fact there as well. I'm really stumbling down the stretch here. But yeah, there are only 8 bank robberies in a 40-year period. There was really just one every 5 years. So pretty much all of that bank robbery sort of outlaw stuff. There were obviously outlaws out in the Old West. There were just never any big high-stakes bank robberies like that. Usually going for trains and such like that. But even the train robberies were not as common as you would think. So a lot of Western movie tropes there that are just simply not true. Go out there and educate yourself if you like. If not, yeah, you can just take my word for it right now. But with that, I am done talking in circles. I will talk to y'all on the morrow, my friends. See you.